Introduction. Continental shelf is an extraordinary place for life in the oceans and vital for life support for the planet. Extended periods under high autotrophic biomass and primary production make the area the most productive in the oceans. Despite occupying an area of about 8.9% of the world's ocean, coastal ecosystems generate nearly 25% of the global biological productivity and more than 90% of total fish catch. Seasonal wind-driven water masses promote intense suspension of bottom sediments with consequent rapid return of nutrients to the euphotic zone. Here, the physical transport and biogeochemical transformation processes affect the fluxes of nitrogen and carbon into and out of the system. The relative shallowness of the shelf facilitates the recycling process and is the structural cause of the high biomass found. Indeed, the major part of the atmospheric carbon fixation through photosynthesis occurs in potentially fertile shelves where it becomes incorporated to pelagic and benthic organisms besides bottom detritus. Continental shelf surrounds every continent and represents the submerged extension of the land. With shallow seas associated forms a dynamic transitional system between the shoreline and deep sea. Width is variable and dependent on local topography with some areas more extensive than others. Mean values are about 70 to 80 kilometers, and oceans with passive continental margins, like the Atlantic Ocean, present broader shelves than those of active tectonic margins, as the Pacific Ocean. In Brazil, the equatorial northernmost Amazon shelf is about 330 kilometers wide, whereas in the northeast coast, on parallel 14 degrees south, the narrowest shelf is about 10 kilometers wide. The shelf is a low-sloping platform, with gradients lower than 1 to 1,000, 1 meter of decline for 1,000 meters of extension. However, local variability occurs due to the presence of canyons, valleys, and channels formed mainly during glacial and interglacial periods when sea level fluctuated. The coastline is the landward limit of the shelf that increases in depth to about 100 to 200 meters where the gradient abruptly changes to about 140 forming the slope. The shelf break marks the offshore limit of the continental shelf. Shelves can be divided into different areas according to distance from the coast. Generally, two areas are present, the inner or coastal shelf and outer or external shelf. Sometimes, depending on the shelf's width and hydrological regime, a middle region may appear between the two. The shelf division occurs due to differences in topography, hydrology, or sediment type, and there is no abrupt change between habitats when the frequent species overlap. Climatic and hydrological processes act intensively on the shelf in several scales of time and space, and consequently, the environment is highly dynamic. Another important characteristic is that stability increases with distance from the coast and depth. Depth is a driving factor, but many others contribute to coastal instability as the seasonal change in temperature and salinity, water mass circulation, waves and storms, type of sediments, rivers inflow with chemical and geochemical alterations, and light. For benthic communities, the type of sediment, food availability, and benthopelagic coupling are essential among other biological and environmental interactions. Sediments present in shelves are continental in origin and transported mainly by rivers but also by glaciers and winds. Light intensity may extend down 200 meters, favoring photosynthesis and plant growth in both the water column and at the sea bottom, with consequent abundance and diversity of benthic life. Also important are the non-living resources on the seabed such as the oil and gas resources. A great part of the petroleum production nowadays has been drawn out from the shelf. The loss of marine diversity is higher in shallow coastal areas as a result of conflicting uses of coastal habitats. It is closely connected with ocean pollution and acidification and results from man's interference. More than 50% of the human population lives near the coast, and the intense development of cities and use and abuse of marine waters and bottoms threaten the integrity of shelf systems. Sustainable usage of marine shelf systems continues to be imperative in addition to the living resource management. The pressing need for estimating the species diversity has been a significant asset for conservation programs, and several and useful tools were developed in the last few decades for that. Taxonomic sufficiency and biotic indices among others allow a rapid diversity and structural assessment of the benthic communities of tropical and subtropical areas scarcely studied.